If your company handles sensitive data, you've probably come across SOC 2 and ISO 27001. But choosing the wrong framework could waste months of effort and tens of thousands of dollars. My name's Christian Khoury. I've helped companies save over 600 hours on compliance. And in this video, I'll break down the key differences, when to choose each one, and how to get certified faster. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear roadmap for how to tackle these frameworks. So let's dive in. I'll start with ISO 27001. This is the gold standard for managing information security. It's an internationally recognized framework that helps companies protect sensitive data, minimize security risks, and prove to clients that they take security seriously. At its core, ISO is all about building an information security management system, or ISMS. Think of it as the blueprint for how your company protects its data, what policies you have in place, how you handle security risks, and how you respond if something goes wrong. And there's a reason companies care about this. If you work with large enterprises, financial institutions, healthcare organizations, or government agencies, chances are they'll expect you to have ISO 27001 certification before they even consider doing business with you. Now, here's how it actually works. ISO is built around three core security principles: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, also known as the CIA triad. Confidentiality means making sure only the right people have access to sensitive information. Integrity ensures that data isn't altered, corrupted, or tampered with, and availability makes sure that data is accessible when needed, so security measures don't slow down operations. But getting ISO 27001 certified isn't quick or easy. Unlike SOC 2, which is an attestation, ISO 27001 is an actual certification. And so just so you know the difference, an attestation is just an auditor's opinion on your security posture. It's not something you pass or fail. You'll just get a report with their opinion that you can share with your clients. A certification is more like a final exam in college, where an auditor performs an actual assessment and gives you a clear pass or fail outcome. It's a two-stage process where your auditor will dig through your policies, interview your employees, and check whether your security measures actually work. And once you pass, you'll get a certification that's valid for 3 years. And during those 3 years, there are still mandatory annual audits to make sure that you're keeping up with your security requirements. ISO 27001 also takes a risk-based approach to security, meaning that you have to actively identify, assess, and mitigate potential security threats. That's why it comes with a set of 93 security controls, which are known as Annex A. These cover everything from encryption, access management, and physical security and employee training. So to sum it up, ISO 27001 is structured, globally recognized, and required by industries that take security very seriously. But it also takes more time and effort to achieve. Now, I'll compare that to SOC 2. SOC 2 is a US-based compliance standard designed specifically for service providers that handle customer data. If you're running a SaaS company, a cloud service provider, or a fintech platform, chances are you've heard of it. While ISO 27001 is all about managing security at a company-wide level, SOC 2 focuses more on how well you protect customer data in your systems. It's built around what are called the trust services criteria, which are 5 key areas. It's security, so this one's mandatory for everyone; availability, which is how reliable your systems are; processing integrity, which is making sure data is accurate and complete; confidentiality, which is controlling who has access to sensitive information; and privacy, which is where you're protecting personal data and complying with privacy laws. Now, here's where SOC 2 gets a little tricky. There are actually 2 types of SOC 2 reports, and they serve different purposes. There's a SOC 2 Type 1, which looks at whether your security controls are properly designed at a specific point in time, and there's a SOC 2 Type 2, which goes a step further. A Type 2 checks whether those controls actually work over a period of time, usually 3 to 12 months. Most clients want a SOC 2 Type 2 report because it proves that your security measures aren't just for show. They actually work over time. But here's the key difference between SOC 2 and ISO 27001. SOC 2 is not a certification. It's an attestation. That means instead of getting a SOC 2 certified badge, you get a detailed report from an independent CPA firm, which you can then share with your clients. And because SOC 2 is more flexible, companies get to decide which of the 5 trust services criteria they want to include based on their business model. For example, a SaaS company handling financial transactions might need security, processing integrity, and confidentiality. But a healthcare tech platform dealing with patient data would focus more on security and privacy. So let's bring it all together. ISO 27001 is structured, globally recognized, and heavily focused on risk management. It's mandatory for industries like finance, healthcare, and government. SOC 2, on the other hand, is flexible, US focused, and tailored to SaaS and cloud companies that need to prove they handle customer data securely. Both frameworks help you build trust and close deals, but choosing the right one depends on who your clients are and where you operate. So now that we've got the basics down, let's talk about where these frameworks overlap, and more importantly, where they differ in ways that actually matter. First, I'll cover the similarities, then I'll get into the differences. At the end of the day, both of these frameworks exist for the same reason: to help companies protect sensitive data and manage security risks. Whether you're going for ISO 27001 or SOC 2, you're committing to stronger security practices, better risk management, and increased trust with more customers. The first similarity is that they both focus on protecting data and reducing risk. This is the whole point of both frameworks. They force companies to take security seriously by identifying risks, implementing controls, and making sure those controls actually work. ISO 27001 does this by requiring a formal risk management process. You have to identify threats, assess their impact, and put security measures in place to reduce risk. SOC 2 is similar, but instead of following a fixed list of security controls like ISO 27001, it lets you define your own security controls as long as they align with the trust services criteria. Either way, both frameworks make sure you're not just reacting to security issues after they happen, you're actively working to prevent them. The next similarity is that they both require risk assessments and continuous improvement. Security obviously isn't a set it and forget it thing. Both ISO 27001 and SOC 2 require ongoing risk assessments and updates to security policies. With ISO, companies have to perform risk assessments regularly and prove that they're improving their security measures over time. That's why certification isn't just a one-time thing. There are mandatory annual audits called surveillance audits to make sure your company's actually maintaining compliance with ISO 27001. SOC 2 works in a similar way, especially if you're doing a SOC 2 Type 2, which evaluates your security over several months. Companies have to show that their controls aren't just set up correctly, they're actually being followed and improved when necessary. Now, why do companies actually go through the time and effort to get ISO 27001 and SOC 2 compliant? Well, because their customers care. When your company achieves ISO 27001 or gets a SOC 2 report, you're proving that you take security seriously. For clients, this is a big deal, especially if they're trusting you with sensitive data. For SaaS companies, SOC 2 is usually a requirement before enterprise clients will even consider working with you. And for companies operating internationally, ISO 27001 can open the door to bigger contracts. Either way, both frameworks act as a stamp of approval that help your company close deals and build credibility. Another similarity is that both require documented security policies and employee training. Good security obviously isn't just about having strong firewalls or fancy encryption. It's about making sure your entire team understands security best practices. Both ISO and SOC 2 require companies to have documented security policies that cover everything from access control and data encryption to incident response plans. And it's not enough to just write policies and forget about them. Companies also need to train employees on security best practices, because even the best security system can fail if employees aren't following the rules. Both of these frameworks can give companies a competitive advantage. Getting compliant obviously takes time, effort, and money, but the companies that do it gain a huge competitive edge. ISO 27001 certification can help companies win international clients who require strong security measures, and SOC 2 compliance can be the difference between closing a big SaaS deal or losing it to a competitor who already has a SOC 2 report. So while the upfront effort might seem like a hassle, the long-term benefits, the trust, bigger clients, and stronger security are well worth it. So to recap, both ISO 27001 and SOC 2 are designed to protect data and manage security risks. Both require companies to assess risks and continuously improve security practices. They both build trust with clients and help companies close deals. They both require clear security policies and employee training, and they both give companies a serious competitive advantage. So now that we've covered the similarities, let's get into the differences, because while they might look alike on the surface, ISO 27001 and SOC 2 take very different approaches to security. This part is what's actually going to help you decide which one makes sense for your business. The first differentiating factor is your geography. Where are your clients? Now, one of the biggest differences between ISO and SOC 2 is where they're recognized and expected. ISO 27001 is an international standard. It's widely recognized in Europe, Asia, and other global markets. So if your company works with clients outside the US, especially in industries like finance, healthcare, or enterprise tech, there's a good chance they'll expect ISO 27001. SOC 2, on the other hand, is primarily used in the US and North America. It was developed by the American Institute of CPAs, or the AICPA. So it's mostly relevant for companies that serve US-based clients, especially in the SaaS, cloud computing, and fintech industries. So here's the deciding factor. If you're dealing with global clients, ISO 27001 is likely the better option. If your clients are mostly in the US, SOC 2 is probably what they expect. Now, I mentioned this briefly already, but the next major difference is how these frameworks are audited and verified. And this is where things get technical. ISO 27001 is a formal certification. That means an accredited third-party certification body has to assess your entire security management system. They have to perform a full audit and officially certify that you meet ISO 27001 standards. This is a pass or fail process. Either you meet the requirements and get certified, or you don't. And once you're certified, you need to undergo annual surveillance audits to prove that you're maintaining your security compliance. SOC 2, on the other hand, is not a certification. It's an attestation. So instead of a pass-fail system, a CPA firm evaluates your security controls and provides a SOC 2 report that explains whether your controls are designed and working effectively. There is no formal SOC 2 certified status. You just get a Type 1 or a Type 2 report that you can then share with your clients. Each company decides whether your report meets their requirements. This makes SOC 2 a bit more flexible, but it also means there's no single standard what good enough looks like, since different clients may have different expectations. So to sum it all up, ISO 27001 gives you an official certification that's valid for 3 years. SOC 2 gives you a report, but it's up to each client to decide if it meets their security requirements. If you want a clear, internationally recognized certification, go for ISO 27001. If you just need to prove security to US clients, SOC 2 might be enough. Another difference is the control framework, right? Structured versus flexible. ISO 27001 has a fixed set of security requirements, but SOC 2 is much more flexible. If you're going for ISO 27001, you need to follow 93 predefined security controls, which are called Annex A. These are divided into 4 categories. First are organizational controls, so policies, risk management, governance. Second is people controls, so that'll be the employee training, access management, and your HR security. Third is physical controls, so office security, data center security, and asset protection. And fourth is technological controls, so encryption, logging, firewalls, incident response. You don't necessarily have to implement all 93 controls, but if you leave anything out, you need to justify why, and that's something that auditors will scrutinize. SOC 2, on the other hand, doesn't have a fixed list of controls. Instead, you choose controls based on the trust services criteria that are relevant to your business. For example, if you're a SaaS company handling payment data, you might need security, processing integrity, and confidentiality controls. If you're a healthcare company working with patient data, you would probably focus on security and privacy. This makes SOC 2 more flexible, but also less predictable. Your auditor has to determine whether your chosen controls are enough, and different clients may have different expectations. If you prefer a structured, standardized approach, ISO 27001 is the way to go. If you prefer customization and flexibility, SOC 2 might be a better fit. Now let's talk about something every business cares about: cost and timeline. ISO 27001 typically costs $30,000 to $75,000 and takes 6 to 12 months to get certified. The process involves building an information security management system, or an ISMS, conducting a full risk assessment, implementing required security controls, and passing 2 external audits. Since ISO 27001 is valid for 3 years, companies usually see it as a long-term investment, but it also does come with mandatory annual audits that add to the cost. SOC 2 compliance costs between $20,000 and $100,000. And I know that's a really big range. It's because it depends on whether you're doing a SOC 2 Type 1 or a Type 2. It depends on which auditor you choose. It depends on the tools you have available. There's a lot of variables there, but it usually takes between 3 and 12 months to achieve. SOC 2 Type 1 is faster and cheaper because it only assesses controls at a specific point in time. A SOC 2 Type 2 takes longer and costs more because it requires ongoing evaluation over a period of 3 to 12 months. And that's something that you actually have to select as a 3-month, 6-month, or 12-month audit period. One big difference here that's important to note is that SOC 2 reports are usually valid for 12 months. So if you want to remain compliant, you'll need to get audited again every 12 months. So in short, ISO 27001 takes longer to achieve, but lasts 3 years with annual audits. SOC 2 can be faster to achieve for the first time, but you still have to do an annual audit every year. If you want a one-time investment that lasts longer, ISO 27001 makes a little bit more sense, and if you need something quicker to satisfy clients, SOC 2 might be better. Compliance costs can vary pretty wildly depending on your company size, your industry, your security maturity as it stands, and which frameworks you need. So instead of guessing, or worse, overpaying, you can actually use our free compliance cost calculator to get a fully customized estimate. So here's how it works. First, you enter your company details. We factor in your size, your industry, and your team structure. Then you select the frameworks you need, whether it's SOC 2, ISO 27001, or both. The calculator will actually adjust based on your selection. Then we account for audit fees, internal costs, and automation savings. So you get a realistic estimate of what compliance is going to cost you. So to access that calculator, I will leave a link to that in the description below. Now let's cover client expectations and use cases. What do your customers actually want? Because at the end of the day, this is the biggest deciding factor. Whether you need ISO 27001 or SOC 2 depends on what your clients expect. ISO 27001 is preferred by large enterprises, financial institutions, healthcare providers, and government agencies, especially outside of the US. If you're working with clients in Europe or Asia, ISO 27001 will likely be required in your contracts. SOC 2 is widely expected for US-based SaaS companies, cloud service providers, and fintech startups. Many enterprise clients in the US won't even consider working with a vendor unless they are SOC 2 compliant. So the simplest way to decide, look at your contracts. If clients are asking for ISO 27001 certification, you'll need to go through the full process. If clients just want SOC 2 reports, that's your answer. If clients aren't asking for either but care about security, a SOC 2 Type 1 is a fast, lower cost way to prove compliance. So let's recap what we covered here. If you operate globally, ISO 27001 is better. If your clients are based in the US, SOC 2 is the right choice. If you need an official certification, I would suggest ISO 27001. But if you want flexibility and faster results, SOC 2 is better. If cost is a major factor for you, a SOC 2 Type 1 is probably the cheapest and quickest option. So now that we've covered the key differences, let's talk about how to actually decide which one makes sense for your business, because in some cases, you might need both. I'm going to walk you through the steps for each framework so you have a clear roadmap to follow. We'll start with ISO 27001 and then move on to SOC 2. The first step in your ISO 27001 journey is to conduct a thorough gap analysis. That means taking a close look at your security practices and comparing them against the requirements of the ISO 27001 framework. Identify where your processes fall short, where you need to tighten your controls, and what policies you're missing. This analysis sets the stage for everything that follows. Once you know where the gaps are, the next step is to develop an information security management system, or an ISMS. This involves drafting the necessary policies, procedures, and risk assessments that address every aspect of your data security. You're basically creating a blueprint that outlines how you're going to protect your information and manage risk. It's important to document everything clearly because these documents are what auditors are going to review. After your ISMS is in place, it's time to implement the security controls. This means putting your policies into action, deploying technical controls, establishing processes, and training your team on these new procedures. It's not enough to just have a plan. You need to ensure that the controls are actively monitored and improved over time. Next comes the external audit phase. You'll undergo a stage 1 audit where a certified body reviews your documentation and assesses your readiness. Once that's passed, you'll move on to the stage 2 audit, which is a comprehensive check of how well your controls are working in practice. If everything checks out, you earn your ISO 27001 certification. Remember though, certification isn't a one and done deal. You'll need to undergo annual surveillance audits to maintain your status. Now switching gears to SOC 2, the first step is to identify which of the trust services criteria are relevant to your business. While security is mandatory, you might also need to focus on availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, or privacy, depending on the nature of your services. This decision sets the scope for your compliance efforts. Once you've defined your criteria, perform a readiness assessment. This is similar to the gap analysis for ISO 27001. You have to review your current controls and processes to pinpoint any areas that need improvement. The goal here is to make sure you're in a solid position before the formal audit process begins. With your assessment complete, now you can start implementing the necessary security controls. This involves setting up and documenting processes that align with your chosen criteria as well as training your staff on these new practices. The flexibility of SOC 2 allows you to tailor the controls to fit your business model, but it also means you need to be diligent in showing that they work efficiently. The next step is to engage a CPA firm to conduct your SOC 2 audit. Depending on your needs, you could opt for a Type 1 audit, which evaluates your controls at a specific point in time, or a Type 2 audit, which examines their effectiveness over a period, usually between 3 and 12 months. This is something that you actually select. This audit will result in a SOC 2 report that you can then share with your clients to demonstrate your commitment to data security. Finally, once you receive your SOC 2 report, it's important to maintain compliance. This means continuously monitoring your controls and making improvements where necessary, and being prepared to undergo the audit process again on an annual basis. By following these steps, you can streamline your path to SOC 2 compliance and reassure your clients that their data is in safe hands. So now that we've covered what ISO 27001 and SOC 2 are, how they compare, and how to get certified, let's talk about the best strategy for this year, especially if you want to save time and money while getting compliant as fast as possible. For some companies, choosing one framework is enough, but for others, getting both SOC 2 and ISO 27001 makes the most sense. So let's break that down. More and more companies are deciding to pursue both SOC 2 and ISO 27001 at the same time. Why? Because it expands their market reach, it strengthens their security posture, and it reduces redundant audits in the future. If you know that you're going to do both anyways, you might as well combine them and do them together. First, getting both opens doors to more clients. If you only have SOC 2, you might run into problems when trying to close deals with international companies that expect ISO 27001. And if you only have ISO 27001, you could miss out on opportunities with US clients that require SOC 2 reports before signing contracts. Second, having both proves that your company is serious about security. When you can show both an ISO 27001 certification and a SOC 2 report, it signals to potential customers, investors, and partners that you're operating at the highest level of security compliance. This builds trust and credibility, which, let's be honest, can be the difference between winning and losing big deals. And finally, getting both can actually reduce redundant work in the long run. There's a lot of overlap between SOC 2 and ISO 27001, meaning that if you go after both at the same time, you can actually streamline the process instead of doing the same work twice. Some companies that start with SOC 2 realize later that they need ISO 27001 too. And by that point, they have to go back and redo a lot of work they could have handled in one go. That being said, getting both takes time and money, which is why it's important to be strategic about how you do it. And that's where automation tools can make a huge difference. Typically, SOC 2 and ISO 27001 compliance is slow, expensive, and full of manual work. Companies spend months collecting evidence, writing policies, and preparing for these audits. And if they don't get it right the first time, they have to go back and fix things, wasting even more time. This is where AI-driven compliance tools like EasyAudit come in. Instead of relying on manual processes, consultants, and spreadsheets, EasyAudit automates the compliance process. It makes it faster, cheaper, and way less stressful. So how does it work? Well, firstly, AI-driven automation removes manual processes. One of the biggest bottlenecks in compliance is collecting evidence. Things like access logs, employee security training records, incident response procedures, and vendor risk assessments. Normally, companies have to track all of this manually, pulling reports from different systems and formatting everything for auditors. With EasyAudit, AI handles this automatically. It pulls in data from your existing tools, it flags missing evidence, and it organizes everything in a ready-to-go audit format. This means less manual work for your team and faster preparation for SOC 2 and ISO 27001 audits. Cross-mapping between SOC 2 and ISO 27001 is also a huge way to eliminate redundant work. Now, here's where things get really interesting. SOC 2 and ISO 27001 have a massive overlap. If you're going for both, you're going to be implementing a lot of the same security control. But the problem is most companies treat them as two completely separate projects, which wastes a lot of time and duplicates the amount of work you're doing. EasyAudit solves this with cross-mapping automation. The platform automatically maps SOC 2 controls to ISO 27001 controls and vice versa. So you don't have to manually track which security measures overlap. This means that when you implement a control for one framework, you're also checking off requirements for the other. This alone saves you hundreds of hours. For example, if you implement access controls for SOC 2, EasyAudit automatically applies that to ISO 27001's access management requirements. If you complete a vendor risk assessment for ISO 27001, it counts towards your SOC 2 compliance as well. This cross-mapping feature alone can cut your compliance effort in half, making it much easier to get both SOC 2 and ISO 27001 compliant without doubling your workload. Writing policies from scratch is another major time sink in compliance. Most companies don't have pre-existing security policies that automatically align perfectly with ISO and SOC 2, so they end up spending weeks drafting documents or paying consultants thousands of dollars to do it for them. EasyAudit solves this with pre-built customizable policy templates. These are designed to meet both SOC 2 and ISO 27001 standards right out of the box. So all you have to do is adjust them to fit your specific business needs. This cuts down documentation time from weeks to days. So which path should you take? Here's how to make the best decision for your business. If all your customers are in the US, SOC 2 is the best starting point. It's the most common security framework for SaaS companies, cloud service providers, and fintech businesses in North America. Since most US-based enterprises require SOC 2 compliance before signing vendor contracts, getting a SOC 2 Type 2 report will help you close deals and build trust with those clients. If you have international clients or plan to expand outside the US, ISO 27001 is the better choice. Many companies in Europe, Asia, and highly regulated industries like finance and healthcare expect ISO 27001 certification as a baseline requirement. ISO 27001 also positions your company as a leader in security. So if you're planning to work with large enterprises that care about global security standards, this certification will give you a serious competitive advantage. If you eventually need both but don't have the budget to do them at the same time, start with SOC 2. Especially if most of your clients are in the US. SOC 2 is generally faster and easier to achieve than ISO 27001, so it's a good short-term win that helps you start closing deals right away. Then, once you've landed some bigger clients and built momentum, you can invest in ISO 27001 so that you can expand globally and strengthen your security posture. If you want to see how EasyAudit works, click the link in the description and check it out for yourself. You'll see how automation makes compliance faster, easier, and much more affordable. If you have any questions about SOC 2, drop them in the comments. I personally read and respond to every single one. Well, there you have it. Those are the differences between SOC 2 and ISO 27001, which one you need, and what steps to take from here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one.